sir.
Yeah. So all my dear students, very good afternoon to all of you. So, and I welcome you all to this webinar series. We are very fortunate and happy enough to have today's esteemed speaker, Dr. Praveen Gavai, who is alumni of our family. So Dr. Praveen Gavli has done his MPT from Krishna College of Physiotherapy and has done his Bachelor's of Physiotherapy from Ravi Nair College. Presently, he is the head of Department of Physiotherapy College from Government Medical College and Hospital, Latur. He is working at this post since 3.5 years. Previously, he was a part of our faculty too. He was working as assistant professor in our university for nearly about 2 years. Before that, he was also working in Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapit College on the post of assistant professor for a period of 1.5 years. Sir has total number of 8 publications in PubMed, Web of Science, and Scopus Index journals. And he's also invited as a guest speaker in various workshops all around Maharashtra. So we are very happy to have Praveen sir, you as today's speaker, and we wholeheartedly welcome you for today's talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suraj sir, for your words of appreciation, and I'm happy to join the Krishna family once again. Dr. Trupti, shall we start with the webinar?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so good afternoon, one and all. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. G. Varadarajalu sir, Principal, Dean, Faculty of Physiotherapy of Krishna College of Physiotherapy, deemed to be University Karad. And I am thankful to Dr. Suraj sir for the wonderful words of appreciation. First of all, I would like to introduce as a Krishna family member. I am an alumni of Krishna College of Physiotherapy. I had completed my master's in neurosciences from Krishna College, and lots of memories are there with the KCPT. So, and even I'm happy to get connected with my students, which are, I guess, online. So, just started the screen also. So, I'm happy to have everyone over here. So, I welcome you all for this webinar, which is the basics of neurophysiology of sensory and motor neurological examination. Okay, so what we are going to see in this webinar is as a routine day, a physiotherapist, maybe a student, a clinician, or even a staff, we go for a OPD patients and IPD patients neurological assessment. But we follow a particular protocol, lots of things we note down. We go for assessing from point to point, like n number of things we note in our evaluation form. But what happens to the inside of our body, or what happens inside the system when you are doing an neurological examination? That basic we are going to see over here. So we'll be starting with the seminar. So what basics we are going to deal with this seminar is, under these headings we are going to see this seminar. So what you do during your neurological examination, that means what input you are going to give during your neurological examination, then what happens after giving an input to a particular system, that may be a sensory system or a motor system, or either you may say a reflex or a muscle tone, then what response you get after giving a stimuli, that will be an outcome. What outcome you will see, and from that outcome, what probable diagnosis you are going to do, or what you are going to conclude with that proper assessment. So starting with the objectives of my webinar. So first of all, we'll go with the neurological examination outline, the basic headlines or the components of neurological examination. Then we'll look for the basics of sensory examination, basics of motor examination. Then we'll look for the neurophysiology and clinical significance of sensory examination. Then we'll proceed towards the neurophysiology of motor examination and its components. in which, as the time constraints are there, I will not be able to include each and every part of the neurophysiology of the sensory as well as the motor examination. So we are going to see the highlights of it and specific parts of it, which are definitely going to be helpful for all the physiotherapy students, even the practicing physiotherapist, and to some extent to the staffs also. So after that, we are going to conclude from sensory and motor examination. So first of all, starting with the outline of neurological examination, we are going to see the history, then we will look for the higher mental functions, then cranial nerve examination, sensory system, as well as motor system examination, coordination and balance examination, then gait. Okay, so starting with the history, as you all know, history is very specific tool to find out the differential diagnosis even before proceeding to the specific assessment of any system, be it the musculoskeletal, neurological, cardiovascular, or respiratory system. So a detailed history is a key to find out which part of the system is affected or which area of the system is affected. So your appropriate history about the present illness is going to give you an important clue in which direction your assessment is going to proceed. When a patient is coming to your department, you don't know what are the condition or what is his diagnosis. Okay, so he'll start sharing his problems with you. Will say, "Ki, sir, I'm not able to lift my hand. I'm not able to lift my leg. I'm not able to move." Or someone says, "Sir, I'm having a pain which is going down my leg, is coming from my back." So this is how the patient will explain you his complaints. Okay. So depending on his history of present illness, you are going to get a clue that which system is affected. A patient comes to you, it is not possible to go for an each and every system examination thoroughly. Like if a patient comes to your OPD, you will not go for complete musculoskeletal examination, neurological examination, even cardiovascular. No. So for that, the history, proper history, will give you the clue how to proceed for your examination. Now, when a patient is coming to your neurological OPD, patient may complain with weakness, pain which is radiating, having a numbness, or some sort of you can say the balance problem or the gait problem. So, a number of complaints the patient will be having. So these complaints will take you to a differential diagnosis and we'll get an idea, okay, now this is the component which I'm going to look for. If I consider an example, if a patient is coming to me who is complaining of weakness on the left upper limb and lower limb, then my probable diagnosis will shift towards, okay, this patient could be having a stroke, all right? So my specific examination will go in the direction of stroke, starting from the higher mental functions up to the gait examination. Okay, I hope I made you clear the history, why it is important and how it is important and how you are going to conclude from the history to which path you have to go for your examination. Coming to the higher mental functions, as you all knows, हमें ये रटा दिया जाता है कि ओके हायर मेंटल फंक्शंस में आपको क्या क्या देखना है, न्यूरोलॉजिकल एग्जामिनेशंस के ये कंपोनेंट है. ओके, सो in higher mental functions, we'll be first looking for the level of consciousness. You all know that for the level of consciousness, we are routinely using Glasgow Coma Scale. Okay, so I will not go into the detail of Glasgow Coma Scale because it will take another lecture. To have a basic neurophysiology and its orientation and the conclusion, we have taken from the level of consciousness, that is from GCS. Then we will look for the behavior of the patient, how he is behaving. Then we will look for the orientation. Now, orientation we are going to assess in different forms, that is to the time, place, and person. Okay, then we are going to look for the memory. That will be a short-term memory as well as the long-term memory. Again, next point we'll be looking for the speech, right? Then at the end of the higher mental examination, you are going to see the mental status examination that will be looked by the mini mental scale test. Okay, if you want, we can share the mini mental scale also with the host, right? Now, after at the higher mental functions examination, we'll look for the cranial nerve examination. You all knows There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves which have the functions you have to taste. Okay, so I'm not going to have a detailed cranial nerve examination as the time doesn't permit me for that. So we'll have a just outlook of it. The first is olfactory nerve, which has the function of smell. Then the optic nerve is assessed for the vision. Then you have third, fourth, and sixth, that is oculomotor, which are for the extraocular muscles. We are going to see the extraocular muscles activities. Okay. Then comes fifth is the trigeminal nerve, that is both motor as well as sensory, have the sensation towards the face and the muscles of mastication. Okay. Coming to the seventh nerve, which is very common nerve. Trupti, is everything okay? I'm getting a message that Dr. Trupti.
Praveen, it's okay.
Yeah, everything is okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, fine. We'll continue with it. So seventh cranial nerve is the facial nerve, which is very routinely we see the patient of facial nerve palsy in our OPDs. So with that we are going facial expressions or the muscles of the facial expression. We ask them to wrinkle the forehead, close the eyes tightly, smile, pursue the lips, puff cheeks. Likewise, we are going to assess the facial nerve. Then eighth is the vestibulocochlear nerve, that is also called as the acoustic nerve, which is required for the hearing as well as the equilibrium. Okay, how you are going to test this? The details are given. You can use a tuning fork to test the hearing. Okay, the ninth is glossopharyngeal nerve, which have a function of the palate elevation, which gives a sensory supply to the posterior third of the tongue. Okay, and it gives the sensation the posterior tongue as well as the pharynx, middle ear, and the dura. It has the function, or you can test this by asking the patient to elevate the tongue to touch the palate. Okay, now you can see the gag reflex also for this. Then 10th is the vagus nerve, that is the muscles of pharynx and larynx. Then 11th and 12th, 11th is the spinal accessory, in which we are going to look for the muscles of larynx, sternocleidomastoid, as well as the trapezius. So in which you are going to ask the patient to shoulder shrug, or you can see the sternocleidomastoid stent also. Last nerve is the hypoglossal nerve, in which you are going to see the intrinsic tongue muscles. Okay, so the last two, these are spinal accessory and hypoglossal. हम लोग इसको ऐसे याद रखते थे कि जो बहुत कंधे उछालता है, like the shoulder shrugging, जो बहुत कंधे उछालते हैं उनका spinal accessory बहुत अच्छा होता है, और जो बहुत बड़बड़ करते हैं या बातें करते हैं उनका hypoglossal बहुत अच्छा होता है, right? So this is how you can remember it. Now coming to the core point to the sensory examination. Sensory examination, we have divided the sensory examination into three main headings. Okay, now these three main headings are specified as the superficial sensations, deep sensation, as well as combined cortical sensation. Now, in superficial sensations, we are going to look for touch, temperature, pain, and pressure. And in deep sensation, we are going to look for the proprioception, kinesthesia, as well as vibration. In combined cortical sensation, we are going to look for the tactile localization, 2-point discrimination, stereognosis, paragnosis, as well as the graphesthesia. Then in motor examination, we are going to look for the muscle tone, the strength of the specific muscle, or in particular upper limb reflexes, as well as the girth or the nutrition of the muscle. Then the coordination and balance, gait, and ADLs for the specific scale. Now coming to the subject, we are going in the today's topic. So that is the specific sensory and motor examination with its basic neurophysiology. Okay, so before understanding the basic neurophysiology, I would like to highlight some of the points which are required to understand the basic physiology of sensory as well as the motor anatomy. So first point in that is that the voluntary movements which we are doing in an everyday will be generated by an impulse which are coming from the cells located in the brain. So your brain is going to produce an impulses which are going to generate the movements. Now these signals travels from the cells down their respective axons, which are forming the corticospinal tract, which are also called as pyramidal tract. At the level of the brainstem, this motor pathway crosses over to the opposite side of the body and continues downward on that side of the spinal cord. Now these nerves which carries or comprise these motor pathways are collectively referred to as upper motor neuron. So the brain and spinal cord will be considered as an upper motor neuron. The differentiation or the physiological differentiation we will see in the next slides. At specific point in the spinal cord, the axon synapses with the second nerve referred to as a lower motor neuron, from where the nerve is going to synapse. That is a second order neuron has to start होगा, वहां से your lower motor neuron is going to start. Remember the differentiating point here will be the anterior horn of the spinal cord. Okay, जहाँ पे हमारा anterior horn होता है, वहां पे हम लोग का ये differentiation point आएगा. Now coming to the lower motor neurons, which are the part of peripheral nervous system, which are made up of the motor as well as the sensory neurons, with the cell bodies located outside of the brain and spinal cord. Now, the axons of the peripheral nervous system travels to and forms a periphery, which are connecting the organs of action, that is muscles or the sensory receptors, with the central nervous system. Nerves which carries the impulses away from the CNS are referred to as the efferent pathways or the motor pathways, while those that bring signal back are called as the afferent or the sensory pathways. Efferent neurons travels peripherally to form peripheral nerve to innervate a specific muscle. The nerve impulses are carried in the form of action potential. Remember guys, this is an important clue how the nerve carries the impulses or the transmission, that is in the form of action potential. The first year physiology, which is all dependent on the what we saw, the complete action potential, how it generated, how it travels. Okay, so that keeping that background, we are starting with the basics of sensory examination. In basics of sensory examination, what you do is what actually you do when you are doing a sensory examination. So whenever I ask even a intern or a PG student or a student of the graduate do the sensory examination, sir or madam, then he will start with, okay, he will take a cotton swab and he will apply it to the skin, right? So this is how a person is going to assess the sensory response, or you are going to go for the sensory examination. Now, various type of stimulations you are going to apply, maybe touch, maybe temperature, maybe pressure, maybe pain. Okay, so a number of stimuli we are going to give, but how these stimuli will be given, okay, or which pattern you are going to follow, and why this pattern is going to follow, we are going to see in this. Okay, so when you are applying a sensory stimulation for the specific examination, you are going to look for specific dermatome. Okay, specific dermatome wise you are going to look. Otherwise, you may have a pattern of the nerve distribution, or you may assess the sensation in gross. Gross means throughout the upper limb or throughout the lower limb. Now, why I am telling this so? Why so? Is there any clinical importance for this, or just for my sake I am saying okay, you have to go with the dermatome, go with the nerve distribution, और मैं ऐसे कह रहा हूँ तो ये क्यों कह रहा हूँ और ये कब करना है? Okay, so how we are going to do with this? So for that we are going to see the basic physiology of it. Okay, now as you all know, your skin has various types of mechanoreceptors which are lying beneath the skin. Okay, so your skin has a number of mechanoreceptors, and number of names are there. Sorry, someone is Tanvi, I guess. Tanvi had drawn something on my screen. Okay, so guys, please cooperate. So these, just a moment. So the mechanoreceptors we are going to see. So these are the Meissner corpuscles which are going to be carry the stimulation of the transient or the even a smallest touch also. That is even a, if you rub a finger on your surface, so that impulses will be carried by the Meissner corpuscles and will be carried to the central nervous system or the respective organ. Okay, Merkel's discs are going to carry the steady pressure. Ruffini's endings are there, which are going again for the strong or the fairly strong pressure. Pacinian corpuscles, they are responsible for the diffuse pressure or against the skin. Okay, then if you see the free nerve endings, those are going to carry the pain, itching sensation, or the temperature sensations. Hair follicle endings will carry the light touch as well as the vibration. Okay. So I guess this is the first is physiology, so I will not go into the deep of it. Moving to the next slide. then what happens when you apply any stimulus to the skin? Okay, if you are able to see my pointer over here, is it visible? I guess. Okay, so if you apply a stimulus to the skin, and the stimulus which is shown here is a pain stimulus, which is with a sharp object. Then what happens when you apply this stimulus? Okay, now this stimulus will be carried through the afferent or the sensory neuron. Okay, this is called as 1A fibers. Now this sensory neuron will carry this information in the form of action potential, and it is going to enter to the dorsal column. Okay, this is the dorsal root ganglion. It is going to enter to the dorsal column of the spinal cord. This is the H-shaped spinal cord transverse section. Okay, if you see this, this is the transverse section of the spinal cord. I'm not going to go into the detail of the TS of the spinal cord. Just for the sake of the overview of the anatomy. This is, sorry, my pointer is missing. Okay, so here the sensory neurons are entering to the dorsal horn and forming a connection or a synapse with the interneuron. Okay, now this interneuron is going to form the secondary connection with the motor neuron, which is going towards the effector. Okay, now when you apply a stimulus, now when this stimulus is applied, which is of a pinprick, or even if you apply, or if you hold an hot object in the hand, the information will be carried immediately to the sensory neuron, which will enter the spinal cord. Immediate integration center of the spinal cord will be activated, or involuntary response will be, you will leave the glass of a hot water. Okay, or if you apply a pinprick, the patient will withdraw the limb. Okay, that is an effector organ, which is a muscle contraction. Now with this, one tract or one of the interneuron will again proceed upwards toward the central nervous system, which we are going to see in the subsequent slides. Okay. So what basically is happening over here, a stimulus will be applied, which will be carried through the sensory neuron to the dorsal root ganglion, then to the dorsal horn, which will again integrate with the integration center. A synapse will be formed, the motor neuron, which will proceed to the effector organ. Okay, so this basic, I guess I'm clear with it. So moving to the next slide, what happens from the spinal cord or your dorsal root, then forward upward towards the cerebral cortex or up to your brain. Now, if you see here, I had shown the two images which are of the two columns, or which are called as the pathways. These are the spinal tract pathways which are going to the brain, right? These are called as the dorsal column or the medial lemniscal pathway. These are, as we know, these are the ascending pathways, and these are responsible for the sensory information. Okay, so these pathways will carry from the distal part, ascends upward, will end up to the brain. Okay, so the main pathways which are responsible for the sensation or the sensory response is the fasciculus cuneatus and the fasciculus gracilis, okay, collectively known as the medial lemniscal system, and the lateral spinothalamic tract, which is responsible for carrying the pain sensation as well as the temperature sensation. So the first image, that is an image A, which I had shown, is responsible for the touch as well as the proprioception and other the sensory information, which will be carried by the fasciculus gracilis as well as the fasciculus cuneatus, okay, collectively known as the medial lemniscal system, right? And the second image, which I had shown here, is responsible for the temperature perception as well as the pain perception. Okay, now these will be collectively called as the lateral spinothalamic tract, responsible for the pain perception as well as the temperature perception. Now, the point here to note is, all of you must be knowing the tract and all. So I'm not going into the detail of the anatomy of the tract, how it starts, what is the origin, what is the insertion, what is the course. Okay, so basics I'm going to look for. When you apply a touch receptor to your foot, okay, if you apply any touch sensation to your foot, the information will be carried by your sensory receptors, okay, which will be carried through the afferent neuron, which you have seen in the first slide, carried to the dorsal column. Now, from this dorsal column, this axon of the first order sensory neuron ends over here. Okay, from here, this ascends upward up to the medulla oblongata. Okay. Now at the level of medulla oblongata, it is going to cross on the opposite side. On crossing the opposite side, it is going to ascend upwards to the thalamus, and from thalamus to the cerebral cortex, where you are going to have a specific arrangement of the information stored for the particular organ, which we are going to see in the coming slides. Okay, so if you see here, the fasciculus cuneatus, this will have a bundle at the cervical cord, which will be responsible for carrying the information from the only upper limb. Okay, it will not go downward the cervical column. See the lumbar cord or lumbar spinal cord, it will be having only the fasciculus gracilis, which will be carrying the impulses from the lower limb. Okay, and the spinothalamic tract here, the point to note here is, for the spinothalamic tract, the neurons are going to cross the side, or it is going to cross the site of the ear, or at the level of spinal cord on the same segment or just one segment above. Okay, so if the point here to remember is, why I'm focusing on the site of crossing is, if the medial lemniscal system or the medial lemniscal tract is affected, then there will be a loss of sensation of the same side if it is having a lesion at the level of spinal cord. Okay, but if it is having any lesion at the level of cerebral cortex, then it is going to affect the sensation on the opposite side of the body. Okay, I guess it is clear now. And if the lateral spinothalamic tract is affected, if the lesion is on the spinal tract or the spinal cord, the sensation will be affected on the lateral aspect or the opposite contralateral side or the now coming at the level of cerebral cortex, which the picture I have shown here is a picture of homunculus, which is showing a somatosensory as well as the motor representation. This is the somatosensory area and this is the motor area. Now, how our body is represented in our brain. Okay, so if you see the image over here, they're starting from the midline of the brain, going towards the lateral side. This is how each and every organ is represented in our brain, starting from the genitals, toes, foot, leg, which are coming to the medial side. Then the hip, trunk, neck, head, shoulder, arm, elbow, forearm, wrist, and hand. Okay. If you see the distribution here, the distribution is given more towards the foot, leg, then less part to the trunk or the neck, head, then upper extremity. And if you see here, the image has shown the more area of the hand. Okay, why the area of the hand is given more distribution? Because our hand is highly sensitive. Okay, it has to represent for the specific or even a small amount of stimuli. So it is highly sensitive because it has the highest representation on the brain. Okay, then coming towards the eye and the face. Okay, your lips are very sensitive. Some even what you can say, even if either also touches to your lips, you may feel something odd, or it is going to give an exaggerated response. Okay, so why this is so? Because it has a highest representation on your homunculus or the somatosensory area. Same will be applicable for the motor area, which we are going to discuss on the next slide. Okay, so after going with these basics of the sensory system, what you are going to conclude of your examination. Okay, so if a subject is able to appreciate the appropriate response, that means everything is normal. Your sensory or your receptors are normal, your sensory neurons are normal, even your spinal cord is intact, your upper tract or the ascending tracts are intact, your brain is intact. Okay, but what if the patient is now not able to perceive any sensation? If sensations are reduced or it is absent. If you assess a sensation on the right side of the upper limb, the patient says, I'm not able to get any kind of sensation on my right upper limb. But when I apply same stimulus to the left upper limb, patient is able to judge it. Okay, so what is the level of lesion, or what you are going to get from this? information. Okay, so you are going to get an information about the site of the lesion, about the site of the lesion, as well as the probable diagnosis. Now, how you are going to get a probable diagnosis? The image which I'm going I'd show here is showing the dermatomal pattern as well as the peripheral nerve distribution pattern. Okay, why this image is here is, from this image we can conclude the level of lesion or the pattern of affection of the sensory system. If someone is having any lesion to the root, if a patient is complaining, okay, sir, I'm having a radiating pain which are going on front of my leg, from lateral aspect to the front of leg. So, what clue you are going to get? Okay, so if you see the arrow over here, so this part which is shown over here is the portion of L5 dermatome. Okay, this L5 dermatome is giving a specific area supplied by this to the skin. Okay, now what is dermatome? Basically, is dermatome is the area of a skin supplied by a specific nerve root or a single nerve root. Now, how it is going to help you to get a diagnosis? Now, if a patient is complaining that I am having the reduced sensation on L5 or this lateral portion of the leg, but medial portion of my leg is normal, sir. So the differentiating feature is the L4 is having a normal sensation, but L4, L5 is having either absent or no sensation. Okay. So what you are going to conclude from it is the patient is having a problem at the level of L5 nerve root. Okay, L5 spinal nerve root. Patient has some pathology. Either it could be because of a disc bulge, or it could be an injury to the root. Okay, that could be a radiculopathy. In a broader term, we call it as a radiculopathy. Now, if you see the other side of this image, it has given a distribution according to the specific nerves. Okay, so if you see here, the most common which we see is a peroneal nerve. Okay, if you see the supply of a peroneal nerve here, which is coming to the anterior aspect of the foot above the ankle, right? And some part is going on the here. Okay, so if a patient is complaining of this specific area loss of sensation, there it could be touch, pain, or temperature also, then this area you can differentiate from the L5 area or the L5 dermatome. Now the patient is not showing symptom of a dermatomal loss of sensation. He is showing the loss of sensation according to the peripheral nerve distribution. Okay, so how you are going to conclude is the patient is having normal sensation over the lateral aspect of the leg, but anterior aspect of the leg or above the ankle is normal, which cannot be the L5 dermatome completely. Okay, so my conclusion will be the patient is specifically having the loss of the sensation because of the neuropathy. The patient is having a neuropathy, whether it could be any kind of neuropathy, it could be a nerve compression, it could be a peripheral neuropathy because of the other diseases like the diabetes mellitus. Okay, the point here to note is in diabetes, the patient will be having demyelination of the nerves starting from the distal towards the periphery. Okay, so there will be a gross loss of the peripheral sensation, maybe of the upper extremity also and the lower extremity also, and will proceed towards the proximal direction. Okay, sometimes we call this as a close, or you can say the stockings like appearance of the loss of sensation, like the girls wear the handles now during the bike riding. Okay, so the loss will be in that fashion, or you are using stockings, the loss will be in that direction. So there will be a cross loss of sensation. So what we are going to conclude from this slide is you are going to reach to a conclusion. Is it a dermatomal affection, or is it a peripheral nerve or a neuropathy affection from the loss of sensation according to this pattern? Now, human brain is not going to memorize each and every portion of this slide. Okay, all the pictures will be stored in your brain, and you are going to differentiate the borderlines of L2, L3, L4, and L5. Okay, so not to worry, you can have a basic chart of this dermatomal or the peripheral nerve distribution pattern when you are going to assess. Even you can have a marking on the lines of marking the lines on the patient skin for the easiest distribution or the pattern of affliction. Okay, so we can mark it on a patient skin also. Even you can use the chart also to have a proper idea of which dermatome is affected or which nerve is affected. Okay. Now coming to the third slide, when you see the patient with spinal cord injuries, okay, it's a very routine question when you are attending exams also, that how you are going to reach to a spinal level or how you are going to conclude a spinal level of injury, level of injury आप कैसे assess करोगे. Okay, so for that this is a basic formula which is showing the relationship between vertebral levels and the spinal segments. Okay, now if you go to the basic development of spinal cord, so during the birth the spinal cord will have the length up to the entire length same as that of the your vertebral column. Okay, but when you develop, जैसे जैसे fetus develop होता है, spinal cord की length छोटी होती जाती है as compared to the vertebral column. Okay, in adult the vertebral column will terminate up to the level of L1. Okay, so when this development happens, the roots are not going to come out from the subsequent vertebral level. Okay, so how it is there? Okay, how these segments are coming and what is the relation of it? So if you see the relation of the upper cervical vertebrae, these are C1 to C4, you don't have to add even a single number. So the same vertebra lies over the same spinal segment. If you see, for the example, third cervical spine will overlay with the third cervical segment. If you see the lower cervical, that is C5 to C7, you have to add one number to the vertebra to get the underlying spinal segment. So if there is a fifth cervical spine, so from the fifth cervical spine, sixth cervical segment will be coming out. Okay. Now coming to the upper thoracic, that is the T1 to T6.
Software.
Yeah, disturbance. Okay, sorry. So if you see the upper thoracic level, that is T1 to T6, you have to add two numbers to reach to the spinal segment. For example, if you are having an injury of the fourth vertebra, so the overlying spinal nerve will be sixth spinal segment. Okay. If you see the lower thoracic spine, that is T7 to T9, you have to add 3 to the number of the vertebra to get the underlying spinal segment. So if there is a ninth thoracic spine, which overlies the 9 plus 3, that will be 12th thoracic segment will be coming through that spine. See the T10, it will be having an L1 and L2 segment. Okay, T11, this is fixed, that will be having a 3 L4 segment. T12, L5 and S1 segment, and at the level of L1, you will be having S2 to coccygeal segment. Below L1, there will be a chorda equina or the bunch of tracts. Now, how you are going to reach to the conclusion or specific diagnosis. Now, if you get a lesion or if you find out there is a pattern of peripheral nerve distribution loss, so you can conclude that the patient is having a neuropathy. It could be a diabetic, which I already told you, which may have a stopping or loose distribution impairment. If the patient is giving an signs, or if you find out in your assessment that particular dermatome is affected, then it could be a reticulopathy. Most commonly, we see the patient of PIVD, in which you will see the specific dermatomes are affected. Then if a patient is having myelopathy or a spinal cord injury, then the loss will be a gross loss in the lower limb according to the roots which are affected. Okay. If there is a apomotor neuron lesion like a stroke or traumatic brain injury, there will be a complete loss of or the gross loss of the upper extremity as well as the lower extremity sensory loss. The note which I written here is the Brown-Sequard syndrome, which is also called section of the spinal cord. Very rare case, but what happens in Brown-Sequard syndrome is there will be a weakness on the same side, but there will be a loss of sensation on the opposite side. Why this occurs? As I already told you, because the spinothalamic tract are going to cross on the same side and going to run upwards to the pyramidal tract on the opposite side. Okay, so if you get a patient with the loss of the strength on the one side and the loss of sensation on the opposite side, your probable diagnosis or your probable diagnosis or differential diagnosis will go with the Brown-Séquard syndrome or the spinal cord injury to the opposite side, which has the sensory loss. Okay. Now, here I had explained the distribution of the affection to the cerebral cortex. Okay, as we had already seen homunculus, how the somatic area is distributed. So, according to the distribution of the arteries, like and in case of a stroke, final year students, third year students also must have studied the stroke, its pathophysiology. So you must have seen the pathophysiology according to the territory of the blood supply, that is anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, or you can see the posterior cerebral artery, or you can see the vertebrobasilar artery. So how you are going to conclude clinically that which artery is affected or which type of stroke the patient is having. Okay, so if the patient is showing the loss of sensation to the leg, okay, patient is having loss of sensation to the leg as compared to the upper extremity as well as the face, your probable diagnosis will be anterior cerebral artery. Same happens with the muscle strength also. Okay, if you see over here, I had shown the muscle or the motor homunculus also. It's showing the representation of the extremity. So if there is an anterior cerebral artery affection, you will have the loss of sensation as well as the loss of strength of the lower extremity more as compared to the upper extremity as well as the face, or you may have a spared upper extremity as well as the face also. Now, if we have the middle cerebral artery affection, you see the patient with the clinical findings that okay, this patient is having some of the strength in the lower extremity, but there is no strength in the upper extremity as well as there is a facial weakness. So the probable diagnosis is your MCA stroke. Okay, on the clinical findings, you are going to get a diagnosis that okay, this patient is probably having an MCA stroke. His MCA artery is having any problem. So he has the more of the weakness on upper extremity as well as face, but his lower extremity is spared, or even the lower extremity is going to get recovered. Okay, this is going to help you when you are going to have a prognosis also. If you get a patient with MCA territory infarct, okay, so you can assure a patient you are going to walk earliest before your hand is going to work. Okay, so this is how some of the portion we have discussed in the somatosensory area. I hope I had made everything clear about the basics of how you are going to proceed with the sensory examination, how you are going to conclude from the sensory examination, and which diagnosis you are going to get, or where the site of lesion is, or which side is affected. Okay, Dr. Trupti, please let me know how much time is left so that I can rush up with the motor examination.
Yes, sir, you can continue, no problem.
Okay, will do. Yeah, thank you. So after having the overview and the basic knowledge of sensory examination, we'll proceed towards the motor examination. Hope every participant is awake because it's an afternoon time. You must be had a very good lunch prepared at home because you all are at home. Mother must be preparing a very nice tasty food and you're getting a sleep. But I know the neurotopics is quite boring somehow. But still, I'm trying to make it easy to understand and make it clear to you so that it will be easy for you to have a clinical knowledge. Okay. So, guys, if you are awake, all we'll proceed towards the motor examination. So, starting with what you do is you are going to assess the muscle tone, muscle strength, reflexes, as well as the muscle girth. Okay. So starting with the tone, before that, I would like to have a basic idea of the reflex testing. Okay. Why I'm just shuffling it with the reflex first, then muscle tone and strength is if you get an neurophysiology of a reflex, then it will be easy to understand the physiology of the muscle tone. Then it will be easy to understand the neurophysiology of the movement also. Okay. So starting with the neurophysiology of the reflex testing. So why do you check the deep tendon reflexes? हमारे प्रोटोकॉल में दिया है सर, n number of formats are there. इसमें हम लोग को मोटर एग्जामिनेशन में बोला गया है कि हमको सबसे पहले टोन देखना है, उसके बाद मसल स्ट्रेंथ देखना है. Also we have to look for the deep tendon reflexes also. Deep tendon reflexes, how are we going to assess? Everyone knows you are going to hammer the tendon, okay? Tendon of the muscle, right? So why do we check the deep tendon reflexes, or what happens when we check the deep tendon reflexes? So let's proceed to solve these questions. Now, if you are able to see this image, which I tried to make it more clear over here, so that it will be easy to understand the neurophysiology of the reflexes. Before looking at the hammer, just have a look. Is on the left side. If you see this image is of the muscle fiber. Okay, there are two types of muscle fibers, which are the intrafusal muscle fibers, which are the small muscle fibers, and the extrafusal muscle fibers, which are responsible for the muscle contractions. Okay, now if you see here the intrafusal muscle fibers, you can see these two types of bands over here. Okay, one is having a thin chain. Okay, now this thin chain will be called as nuclear chain fibers. Okay, just remember this terminology, nuclear chain fibers. And if you see over here, this is a bulky part, which will be having the backs of the nucleus, which will be called as a nuclear back fiber. Okay, I know it is very difficult to understand in a very short time, and that too in a webinar lectures, because I don't have any direct contact with the students and all, so I cannot communicate how you are going to interpret, or how you are interpreting, and how I am communicating. Okay, so I'm just going with it, keeping in mind that you are getting somehow what I'm trying to explain. Okay, so coming back to the intrafusal fibers, here
Dr.
we have
Praveen,
seen, yeah.
if you want to ask any questions, you can ask. They can unmute themselves and give the answer.
Okay, that will be fine. So that will be a very interactive session there.
Exactly.
Yeah, will do. So guys, here we can see the nuclear chain fibers and the nuclear back fibers, which will be going to be called as an intrafusal muscle fibers. Okay, why it is important, we'll see in the next slide. Okay, now this is the extrafusal fibers, or the large muscle fibers, which is going to contract your muscles. Now, how these are supplied with the nerves? Okay, these are the basic muscle spindle unit. Okay, हमने जो ये अभी देखा है, intrafusal and extrafusal fibers, which will be collectively called as the muscle spindle. So, going with the basic physiology of the muscle spindle, if you see these blue lines, these are connected with the intrafusal fibers, both the nuclear chain as well as the nuclear back fibers. Now, these are carried as an afferent nerve. Will be called as the, here if you see, this is carried by the afferent nerve, called as the 1A fibers. Okay, these are the type of fibers which are carrying the sensation from the muscle spindle to the dorsal root. Okay, guys, you understood basic? The sensory or the afferent fibers are the 1A fibers, which are coming from the intrafusal fibers, right? Now, what happens when you apply a hammer to the tendon? Okay, जब हम hammer को apply करते हैं tendon पे, you see the response. Okay, but what happens in the muscle, or what happens with the inner structure when you apply this hammer? When you apply this hammer is going to get an effect to the Golgi tendon organ, which again going to stimulate your intrafusal fibers. They will get activated. Okay. Now, once they get activated, it will produce some sort of stretch to the muscle spindle, and the information will be carried to the dorsal root. Okay. Now, this information which is carried to the dorsal root will be coming to the spinal cord, which forms the interneuron. Okay. Now, this interneuron, the same interneuron will give an efferent pathway to the ventral horn, or the anterior horn, and this information will be carried by your alpha motor neuron to the same muscle, okay, on which you had applied a hammer. Now, what response you will get here when you apply this dirt? These muscle spindles are get activated. The information is carried by the 1A fiber to the spinal cord through the interneuron. It is synapsing to the anterior horn cell, coming through the alpha motor neuron and stimulating the same muscle. Now, when it carries the impulses to the same muscle, the extrafusal fibers will go for an contractions. And what response you see? You see the extension of the leg. Okay, this is a knee jerk. So what response you get here is an extension of the leg, right? And this second neuron, which is coming from the anterior horn cell, which is going to the antagonistic muscle. Okay, what this will do is the synapse will inhibit this neuron and will reduce the action of the antagonistic muscle so that the antagonist will relax and the agonist will contract. Okay, so this is the basic neurophysiology of reflexes. Now, what you are going to conclude from this basic neurophysiology? Okay, so what stimulus we had given here is a knee jerk, that is a patellar jerk. Okay, now what receptor here was the muscle spindle of your quadricep muscles. Okay, then what afferent fibers were there? 1A fibers were your afferent. Which center you had tested? That is the L3L4 nerve root, which is the root value of your knee jerk. Okay, which afferent you tested? That is an alpha motor neuron. Which effector you tested? That is a quadricep muscle. Okay, what if the patient is having a normal reflex? The patient का normal reflex आता है. You saw that you hit at the hammer and there's an extension of the leg. So what reflex you saw is the normal reflex. What does that mean? That means your complete circuit is intact. Okay, your patient is having normal muscle, normal afferent fibers, the dorsal root is okay, your spinal cord is normal, your root is normal, anterior horn cells are normal, your alpha motor neuron or the effector is normal, as well as the motor response is normal. So you conclude your response as a normal reflex jerk, right? What if you get an areflexia? Okay, if you don't get a response, not always. If you see the areflexia or there is no reflex, or if there is an hyporeflexia, what you are going to conclude is it could be a myopathy, that is a muscle injury or muscle disease, that could be a muscular dystrophy, it could be a neuropathy, which are because of the peripheral nerves, that could be a demyelinating condition like GBS or multiple sclerosis. It could be an anterior horn cell disease in case of poliomyelitis or ALS. It could be found in neuromuscular junction disorders, that is myasthenia gravis. And when you see there is a hyperreflexia, or if you see the jerk is exaggerated, what does it mean is the patient is having some sort of upper motor neuron lesion. Either it could be a stroke, either it could be a traumatic brain injury, or either it could be a spinal cord injury in which the tone of the muscle is increased. In that case, you are going to see a hyperreflexia. I want to make a note here that you may see areflexia in case of a cerebellar lesion. The reason for this we'll see in the subsequent slide. Okay, so hope I made you understood the normal physiology of the reflex. So let's have a question, guys. Are you ready? So can you say, or if anyone wish to answer, if a patient is having the loss of the bicep jerk, what could be the probable diagnosis? Anyone want to say answer? If I applied a stroke or a hammer, the bicep tendon, but I didn't able to appreciate the jerk, so what could be the probable diagnosis? Or what could you conclude from that finding? Anyone can answer, just try it. Participants? Hope everyone is there. Yes, Trupti madam. Can you ask any specific participants? Your students are there. Even my students are there also. So anyone? Ms. Akansha Karande, because you are alphabetically very close to me. So I can see your name. Akansha is there. Any response?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, reflexia because of absent of reflex bicep jerk.
Right. Probable diagnosis, can you, yeah, Damini, right here? So
Yes,
Damini,
sir.
could you locate the specific nerve root? You see there is a areflexia of a bicep jerk.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell me which root will be affected?
Sir,
Yes, Shaima is there.
C3, C4.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I'm
So,
sorry, sir.
okay, Damini and Shaima, thank you so much. I guess the participants are very active. I thank Damini and Shaima for the reply. So, my aim was not to test your knowledge of the nerve root. My aim was to uh, have an idea that you got the basic physiology of the reflexes, that means which level is affected or what you are going to conclude. Okay. So with this knowledge, we are proceeding to the next slide. Okay. So this is how we have concluded. Just a moment. I need to. Okay. So we are going with the next slide. Neurophysiology of the muscle tone. Okay. So we are going to deal here with the neurophysiology of the muscle tone. Now, first of all, what is the muscle tone? Okay. What definition you say when you discuss the muscle tone? So it's a steady state of tension, even at rest, in the muscle, or the resistance of a muscle to passive elongation or stretch, which could be at the rest. Okay, so जब हम लोग passively move करते हैं hand, when you had been asked to assess the muscle tone, आप लोग क्या करते हो कि you are going to just elongate the muscle passively to see the resistance. So the definition is itself the same. It's a steady state of tension even at the rest, or it is a resistance to the muscle to the passive elongation or stretch. Okay. Now, if you see this, in just a moment, I will make it clear to you. Okay. So, if you see this image over here, it is the same, somewhat same image which we had seen in the previous of the reflex arc. So, we had gotten a basic idea of the intrafusion fibers, which are the nuclear plaque fibers, nuclear chain fibers. These sensory fibers are coming inside the dorsal column or the dorsal root. These are the 1A, these are the 1A fibers which are entering the dorsal root, going to the spinal cord, or you can say the gray matter, then coming back to the muscle, that is the extrafusal fibers, which are being carried by the alpha motor neurons. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to add one new member to this diagram, that is the gamma fibers. Okay, now these gamma fibers are the fibers which are having an inhibitory discharges. Okay, these gamma fibers, what they do is they have an inhibitory discharges to the extrafusal fibers. Okay, now these gamma fibers and the alpha motor fibers going to have a state of steady contraction. Now, how it is going to happen is these gamma motor neurons will have a continuous discharge to the extrafusal fibers. Okay, just pardon me. Then gamma fibers will have a continuous discharge to the extrafusal fibers. My cursor is visible to you all. So when these gamma motor fibers will have a continuous discharge to the extrafusal fibers, what the muscle is going to do is muscle will have a continuous contractions of the extrafusal fibers. When these extrafusal fibers will contract, again they will sensitize the through the fibers. The same sequence will keep on happening, and the extrafusal fibers will keep on contracting. So someone must be there to regulate this activity of the gamma fibers, so that the muscle will not keep on steady state of contraction. So what happens? These gamma motor neurons have an impulse. The extrafusal fibers will contract. Again, when the impulse is terminated or the impulse is over, again the next stimulus will come from the sensory fibers. Again, it will get activated, and again the same cycle will proceed. Okay. So who is going to control this activity of the muscle spindle? I hope I made it clear how it works. One thing again, I want to say that every time we say that the muscle tone is velocity dependent. Okay. Now, when you say the muscle tone is velocity dependent, or the spasticity, that is an hypertonia, is velocity dependent. So what we say, and why we say that? Okay, so when you say that it is an velocity dependent, that means if you increase the velocity of the movement, if I ask someone to, if I ask someone to go for the testing of the biceps or the biceps muscle tone, so what you will do is you will elongate the bicep muscle. That means you are going to extend your elbow, or passively it will be extended, and you are going to give a stretch to the bicep muscle. Now, if you do it repeatedly or faster, then what happens? So, as the definition says that the muscle tone is velocity dependent, what happens when you increase the speed of the movement? So, what happens? These alpha fibers or the extrafusal fibers will undergo the stretch reflex. Okay, these extrafusal fibers will go for the stretch reflex. Again, the reflex will be carried by your intrafusal fibers. Again, the same procedure will happen, and the tone will continuously go on increasing because of the activity of the alpha motor neuron as well as the gamma motor your gamma motor neurons, right? So when you apply a fast movements, the tone will go on increasing. That is why the definition of spasticity says it is a velocity dependent. So this is an यहाँ से हम लोग एक और point ये सीख सकते हैं कि when a therapist is treating a patient with a stroke, lots of the time when you go to the ward, आप patient के relatives को समझाते हो, okay, this exercise you have to do, and then you explain how to give passive movements to the patient's relative. So what they do is they keep on moving the arm very fastly or vigorously. तो उन्हें कैसे explain कर रहा है why they should not give the fast passive movement, or why the passive movement should not be given slowly to the patient with spasticity. The reason is that the extrafusal fibers will get activated because of the stretch reflex. If the velocity is more, again reflexively going for the contractions of the alpha motor neurons, and again there will be a increased muscle tone, right? So it's an advice which can be given to the patient's relative also. Even we can apply it to our practice also. So wherever you are treating a patient who is having a spasticity, just go with the gradual or the slow passive movements. Don't go for a jerky passive movements or a fast passive movement. Okay. Now coming back to this topic. Now, as we have seen the activities of the gamma motor neuron, alpha motor fibers, as well as the 1A fibers. Now, how these activities of the gamma motor neuron will be controlled? Okay, if in a normal person, the gamma motor neuron keeps on firing, means there will be a sustained contractions of the muscles. So that will not be helpful for your daily movement. How the normal muscle tone is maintained during rest or during activities. So for that, there is an higher center. Okay, now who is the higher center? That is the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is going to monitor how these gamma motor neurons are working. Okay, जैसे principal sir ने कल I guess day before yesterday given an example. You have webinar, so we had given a example of the principal, then staff, then students. Okay, likewise the same is happening over here. The cerebral cortex is the principal. Now the remaining tracts are the staffs, and the gamma motor neurons are the junior staffs, and these are the students. Okay, the extrafusal fiber or the interfusal muscle fibers are the students. If the principal is absent, means the staff will go for the relaxation, then the junior staff will also go for relaxation, and the students will go for an holiday, or there will be a complete, what you can say, the uncontrolled movements of the students in the classroom, right? Then your CR will be punished. Okay, so applying the same principle over here. So what we are going to say is your cerebral cortex is having a time control over your muscle tone via the tracts, okay, which are the descending tracts. Okay, now the cerebral cortex alone is not going to decide how the muscle tone is maintained. Okay, so who is the basic principle behind it is the basal ganglia. Okay, now this basal ganglia is going to modulate the muscle tone. How it is going to modulate the muscle tone? This basal ganglia will have the activation of the cerebral cortex, which can have the activation of the reticular activating system. Okay, now the reticular activating system is the main person who is going to monitor over the activities at the synapses level. Okay, now this reticular activating system will be given a positive discharges continuously to the interneurons, right? So your basal ganglia will have a control of inhibition. Okay, your basal ganglia is going to send inhibitory signals to the reticular activating system so that the muscle tone will be maintained in a normal state at rest. Again, the basal ganglia will have an inhibitory control or send an inhibitory impulses to the cerebral cortex, telling him to activate the reticular system and again modulating the muscle tone. This is how the normal muscle tone is maintained through the upper motor neuron, that is the cerebral cortex, basal ganglia, and the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system is modulated by two important tracts. Those are the cerebrospinal tract as well as the vestibulospinal tract. I will not go into the details of it. So I hope I had made it bit clear to understand what the basic muscle tone is, how it is being controlled, and how it is modulated. Okay. Now moving on to the next slide, that is the neurophysiology of the muscle strength. Okay. So here everything is okay, guys. Anyone? Okay. So after looking at the basic pathophysiology or the basic neurophysiology of the muscle tone, I'm proceeding towards the neurophysiology of the muscle strength. Okay. Now, if you see the muscle strength assessment, we goes for the strength examination in a different patterns. Okay. Now, why these different patterns are there? When I ask someone to go for the assessment of a strength of a particular patient, the person may go for manual muscle testing, which could be of the individual muscle. That is, a specific muscle will be tested. After that, another individual muscle will be tested, or group of muscle will be tested by the manual muscle testing. You may follow the protocol in a myotomal fashion. That is a myotome examination you can do. Then the voluntary control grading. So why these different headings are given? Why I had mentioned manual muscle testing, why myotome examination, why voluntary control grading, why this so? Okay, so it has a clinical importance. Okay, so ये clinical importance हम लोग देखते हैं. So हम लोग MMT कब करेंगे? When we are going to have an manual muscle testing. Okay, so manual muscle testing we are going to assess if the patient is having muscle pathology or a peripheral nerve lesion, or if the patient is having the plexopathy. This idea you are going to get through your history, your previous screening, which the pattern is affected. According to, you are going to select the motor examination. Okay. Now, when you are going to have an myotomal examination, हम लोग myotome examination कैसे करने वाले हैं? If you are suspecting a spinal nerve root lesion, that is in case of a PIVD or a reticulopathy is there, a specific nerve root is compressed, then according to the myotome examination, you can go up to the level of the spinal nerve lesion. जैसे हमने sensory examination में dermatomal examination किया था, you reached up to the spinal level of the dermatomal fashion. Same way you are going to have a myotomal examination. Then voluntary control grading for the stroke patient or the traumatic brain injury where the synergy pattern is there. In that case, you are not going to go for the muscle strength examination or the myotomal strength examination. What you are going to do is the voluntary control grading, because the strength is not lost. What lost is the voluntary control by the upper motor neuron, that is of the higher centers का control loss हुआ है, strength loss नहीं हुई है. So we are going to see the voluntary control grading. Okay. Now, how the muscles moves or how the movement of mechanism of movement is. Okay. So when you say the movement, okay. So if I want to pick up an object, say glass उठाना है, तो my brain should give a signal to the distal pathways, which will be carried, the impulses will be carried to the motor pathways to the effector organ, that is my hand. So the hand should work in a specific pattern, specific strength will be applied, specific tone will be applied, so that I will reach the glass, I will hold it, and I will take it to my mouth. Okay. So for that, who is responsible? So for that, the basic mechanism is controlled by your basal ganglia. Okay. When you see most of the patients MRI report, उसमें लिखा होता है कि basal ganglia is affected, or there is a lesion at the basal ganglia, or there is a bleed at the level of basal ganglia. And when you see that patient clinically, the patient is not able to move his upper extremity or lower extremity. He is not able to initiate the movement. He is not able to control the movement. Okay, why so? Because this initiation and the inhibition or the control of movement is all governed by your basal ganglia through the cerebral cortex. Okay, basal ganglia is not alone responsible for the movement. Okay, your primary motor cortex will be responsible for initiating the movement also, but who will modulate this movement is the basal ganglia. Now, how this basal ganglia is going to modulate? It will modulate through the direct pathway and indirect pathway. Okay. Now, I'm going to discuss only the direct pathway here. So, in direct pathway of basal ganglia, as you can see this image, you can see the upper part, that is the stamen, that is the motor cortex. Here you can see the part of the basal ganglia, that is the striatum. This is substantia nigra. Okay, this is again a part of the basal ganglia, and here is a thalamus. Okay, now how this is going to control the movement? Now, when this motor cortex stimulates or sends an impulse to the striatum. Okay, before that, I'm going to tell you about the thalamus. Okay, now what thalamus does is it inhibits also and it excites also, right? So it can send stimulations to the motor cortex for the inhibition as well as the activation, depending on the neurotransmitters which he receives. Okay, so coming back to the motor cortex, if one wants to initiate a movement, the motor cortex will stimulate the striatum. Now, through the motor cortex, the excitatory neuron will send an impulse to the striatum. Okay. Now, this excitatory neuron, how it is going to decide? It is an excitatory or inhibitory. So, the information is carried through the synapse. Okay, if you see the basic structure of synapse, it will have a presynaptic membrane as well as the postsynaptic membrane. Now, this presynaptic membrane will release an excitatory neurotransmitters. Okay, now what is the neurotransmitter? Here is a glutamate. Now, glutamate will be secreted at the presynaptic membrane, which will be carried through the synapse to the postsynaptic membrane and have an excitatory effect on the striatum. Okay, now the striatum will have two parts, that is putamen and caudate nucleus. Now, this striatum will send an impulse to the your striata nigra or substantia nigra. Okay, now what this substantia nigra will do? It will have an inhibitory impulse to the thalamus, right? Now, inhibition of the thalamus excites the motor cortex. That activity in the thalamus increases, okay, and it is going to initiate a movement. You see this pathway, the impulse is initiated at the motor cortex, will reach to the striatum, then the globus pallidus, which will have an excitation into the pars externa here. Then thalamus will be excited. Thalamus will send an information, that is an inhibition of the thalamus activity, going to activate the motor cortex, and the motor cortex finally will send an excitatory stimulus to the spinal cord through the brainstem to your pyramidal tract, and the movement will be executed. You will have an activity of the movement. This is how the direct pathway of the basal ganglia works for the initiation of the movement. This is how your muscles are going to get initiated or going to get excited, will contract, will produce a tone, your limb will be moved. And how this activity is controlled is how much inhibition should be there, how much excitation should be there. That is controlled by the indirect pathway. That is will be controlled by the indirect pathway. I could have been explained because of the time shortage of time. I not included that slide. Okay, so how we are going to grade the manual muscle strength? You are having two scales. That is a MRC, that is medical research scale, and your Kendall scale, which is a subjective scale. Okay, so according to the MRC scale, you grading is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I don't need to tell you because you all must have mug up it. It's the basic of first year as well as second year, third year, final year, every year's question. And even in control grading. Okay, why voluntary control grading over the MMT? Voluntary control grading you are going to do in the stroke patients because there will be a synergy pattern. Okay, in MMT you are going to see the individual muscle strength, but in voluntary control grading you are going to ask the patient to move the entire limb. There could be upper limb or lower limb. How you are going to grade is it has been graded from 6 to 0, or reverse you can come with 0 to 6 also. Okay, so 0 means there will be no contraction or no movement of the limb. 1 is just a flicker of contractions or the initiation of contraction. Grade 2 is half of the range will be in motion, but that will be in a synergy pattern. Okay, synergy pattern is a different topic. I'm not going to touch it. Then grade 3, full range will be available against gravity, but that will be again in a synergy pattern. Grade 4, initial half range, that is half of the range will be in isolation, but later half will go into the synergy pattern, right? Then grade 5 is there. That means the full range of motion will be in isolation, but when you apply a resistance, the pattern will be changed and it will go into the synergy pattern. Grade 6 is the normal strength or the normal control, that is the full range of motion in isolation, even when we are going to apply a resistance. Okay. Now the myotomal testing, as I told you, which tells you about the root of the spinal level. Okay, if you do the shoulder abduction, if you all can just do that. This is shoulder abduction C5, C6, C7. Okay, मैंने मेरे students को पढ़ाया है. That is this is how it works. C5, C6, then your C7, that is elbow extension. Then C8 is your wrist flexion. Okay, my camera is not able to capture my whole arm, so I will not be able to explain it nicely. So this is how you are going to go for the myotomal examination, which will tell you the specific root of the affection or which level of lesion is there. Okay, यहाँ से हम लोग कैसे conclude करेंगे? Suppose if the patient is able to do the knee extension but not able to do the dorsiflexion. Okay, so my probable level of lesion will be L3 because knee extension is having both L3 L4 segment application. So ankle dorsiflexion is absent. That means L4 level is affected or the level of lesion will be L4 because the L3 is normal. Same will be for upper limb also. You can correlate with it, right? You can differentiate right versus left. आपको हमेशा assess करते वक्त देखना है normal versus abnormal extremity. Okay? Then proximal to distal weakness, how it is proceeding. Proximal में ज़्यादा है, distal में ज़्यादा है. Okay? This also give us a clue of the pattern of affection. Then upper extremities are more involved or lower extremities are more involved, like we discussed in a stroke case. Or is the weakness is generalized, suggestive of the systemic neurological disorder or global deconditioning. Then you have to use proper assessment tool, जैसे हमने अभी कहा है. Okay. So with this, I conclude my session. Thank you so much, Dr. Trupti.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. Dr. Suraj.
Yeah.
Dr. Suraj. Dr. Praveen, it was indeed a very nice presentation. I think the participants are clear with all the doubts. Now they don't have any doubts. Your presentation was so
Oh, that's
clear
great.
and informative that all the doubts regarding the examination part is clear to all our students and the participants.
Thank you, Dr. Trupti.
Yeah, it was really a very informative session. If any of the participants have any doubts, any questions, you can unmute yourself and can ask the question, or you can post it in the chat box. We'll wait for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So guys, the session must have been interactive. I try to make it as simple as possible because understanding neurophysiology It's quite a tough job, but actually, if you make it simpler, it is easy and fun to understand because we usually do the activities, we go for the examination, but we don't think of okay, what actually happens inside our body, what is going on in the background. Okay? So I hope I had made a justice with the topic and I made the topic bit clearer to all. So any questions? I guess my chat box is so empty means we can say that
The session was too clear to the participants. I request the participants to fill the post-test questionnaire. The link for the same is posted in the chat box. It is mandatory to fill the pre and post-test questionnaire to avail the certificates. The link won't be posted in your WhatsApp group. So please fill the post-test using the link.
okay, guys, just let's check out how much doubts have been cleared. Your
Sure.
pre-test score and post-test score. How was your response before giving and before attending a webinar? How you answered the question, like just an ABC, जैसे हम लोग खेलते हैं, ये करूँ या ये करूँ, और post-test how you answers. Okay, right, Dr. Trupti?
Sure, I will share with you the analysis once we are done with it.
Yes, that will be a great help.
Yeah, I hope the participants don't have any doubts. So can we conclude the session?
Okay, from my side, I am done.
Yeah.
Hope I had made everything clear, and thank you so much, Dr. Jeevadraju sir, for giving me an opportunity and selecting me as an alumni to present this webinar on the platform of National Alumni Webinar Series, for including my name and giving me this opportunity. I'm very much thankful to the KCPT family, Dr. Trupti, Dr. Suraj sir, and the whole of the team who are managing this show. Thank you, everyone. It was nice to have a time with you all. Thanks, Dr. Trupti.
Yeah. So with this, we end up the webinar series of National KCPT Alumni Webinar Series. We are looking forward to arrange the International KCPT Alumni Series for the World Physiotherapy Day. So all of you, please keep in touch with us. We shall post regarding it shortly. And with this, I wholeheartedly thank the speakers, the speaker for today, Dr. Pravin Gowli, for sharing his knowledge and giving us his time to share the knowledge on this topic. I again wholeheartedly thank all the remaining speakers, Dr. Vipin Banugde, Dr. Saili Gizra Chitnis, for accepting our invitation and participating in the webinar. Once again, I thank the participants for patiently listening to all the webinars and making it a great success. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Dr. Trupti